believe we can start now.
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I would like to welcome all of you to our fourth session on the webinar series, Digitization and Innovation, the New Normal. This webinar series is organized by Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at the IUC School of Business and Business Association. This session will be focused on health tech. Few months after COVID-19 was formally declared a pandemic, the disease continuously deeply impacted the healthcare industry. Our care providers are faced with critical shortage of both staff and supplies. COVID-19 has deeply shaken the industry with the question of how to provide the right care at the right time, in the right setting, and in a most cost-efficient way. Hospitals and physicians have been racing to focus on clinical care. Pharmaceutical sector is racing to create potential vaccines and antibody tests while also facing its own supply chain issues. As the pandemic hopefully will unfold, it's worth noting that not all lasting effects will be negative. The COVID-19 pandemic is accelerating an overdue technological shifts and advancement that is crucial to provide better health care to our nations. Perhaps the most prominent change that has been in the widespread adoption of the telehealth services, healthcare technologies, among others. Before starting this session, I would like to highlight some webinar logistics. The webinar logistics is that I would like all to keep that this webinar will be first of all recorded. Once we will start, we will mute everyone. Kindly stay on mute and turn off your cameras throughout the session. Panelists are the only one allowed to mute and unmute themselves. The webinar duration will last almost 16 minutes and then the Q&A will start after that. For the Q&A sessions, at the end of the session, the floor will be open for Q&A. Please straight and unmute you. You can open your camera if you wish, introduce yourself, ask your question, or simply type your question in the chat box and the session moderator will direct it. If your question is directed to a specific speaker, please indicate so, or the moderator will direct your question. Now, I would like to welcome, of course, Dr. Hakim Meshreki. Dr. Hakim is the Assistant Professor of Marketing at the American University in Cairo. Dr. Hakim will be moderating the session for today and briefly introducing our guest speakers. Thank you all for attending this session. Dr. Hakim, you can start now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this session. I think we have marvelous guest speakers who provide really a leadership model to how to serve your lives, how to become entrepreneurs, how to start your own business, how to fight the tide, which is very difficult. In this era of COVID-19 that we're still currently living, it's very important to talk about the topic of healthcare and health tech more specifically, because that presents a big challenge. We're hearing many news about the vaccine, and I hope that it brings good news. So I think I'll start first of all by introducing my honorable guest speakers. I'll start by Mr. Nader Iskandar. Mr. Nader Iskandar is the co-founder of Dawi Medical Clinics. There are now 10 clinics, and also recently launched a startup for mental therapy called O7 Therapy. So, of course, the list goes along. He is also an angel investor in 2 other health tech companies, Udawi and Rology. He got his MBA in 1997 from Duke's University, USA. His bachelor degree is in computer science in '89 from the American University in Cairo. So, again, one of our alumni. After completing his MBA, Mr. Nader left the family business, something I couldn't do, and returned to create his first startup, EMEIT, which is in 1998. So welcome, Mr. Nader, aboard, and we're looking forward to hear from you. Moving to our, thank you so much. Moving to our second guest speaker, And by the way, the order does not show importance, it just shows the order. Our second guest speaker is Ms. Yara Abo el Waffa. She's a global health professional with 10 years of international experience in delivering and managing projects, healthcare projects, with a focus on expanding healthcare services through health innovation and digital health. She's currently a healthcare technical advisor in Mott MacDonald. Her previous experience spans the private sector, international organization, and teaching health innovation in universities. She's also a founding member of Health 2.0 Egypt, which is an organization focused on supporting youth entrepreneurs in digital health. So again, welcome Yara aboard, and we're very much looking forward to hear from you. Our last but not least guest speaker today is Mr. Amir Barzum, the founder and CEO of Vezeeta. Mr. Amir has pioneered the health tech space in emerging markets. And as a founder of CEO and Vezeeta, which is a digital healthcare that serves to empower patients in every step of their health journey. Vezeeta has a very big diversified portfolio that spans from doctor's appointment booking platform to teleconsultations, online medication ordering, and the list goes on. As one of the region's fastest growing health tech, Vezeeta has raised more than 60 million in funds to become the digital healthcare concierge that is fast expanding in its reach and impact. So again, welcome Mr. Amir aboard. And with these speakers, strong at least or important questions had to be there. So I'll start by sending my first question to my guest speakers, which is currently, how can we evaluate the size of the health tech business in relationship to the whole healthcare industry? So can we know a little bit what's the size of it versus the healthcare business? And is this size growing? Are hospitals, healthcare providers, and so on more adopting health tech in their business? And what's the current growth rate of this?
And I will jump on this question because Nader has gently asked me to do so. So I wouldn't do so. I would have actually left the floor for Nader to start. So thanks, Nader, for this. But in very quick brief, healthcare in Egypt is $12 to $12.5 billion industry. It's a massive industry, and this is split between public and the private. The split is not very accurate, but the general consensus is around 65% of these dollars are happening at the private sector. So it's a hugely privatized kind of an industry. And if you look at the size of tech of that, it's very, very small, because most of the health tech, and that's exactly the evolution everywhere in the world. It starts by serving providers. You start by selling software to hospitals and to the clinics and so on and so forth. And usually that ends in a smaller piece. I'm always talking about the health software, not the wearables and the likes. But if you sell software to the provider, at the end of the day, it's only B2B game, and it depends on the margins. You can actually start charging. So that is a smaller piece. But really, health tech has become very big in different markets like the US and Europe, when they actually gear the shift towards the consumers, and then they become a technology that is catering for the consumers. And think about one of the biggest health tech players in the world is Tele. It's a brand that consumer would know. They wouldn't hear much about Cerner or Epic, which are the biggest software companies for hospitals, but they would be knowing Teladoc, and that would create a much bigger space. Is it growing? It's growing at an exponential rate, particularly post-COVID. Not the same way that you would see health tech literally bursting in Europe and the US. It's definitely growing there at a faster rate because of the dynamics between government and private insurance, where basically they enforced private insurance to reimburse or pay for teleconsultation the same amount of money if you go to meet the doctor face to face. So ended up doctors actually saying, I'm passing all of my patients to teleconsultation. The teleconsultation boomed. That's not what happened in our regions. It's still growing, but that's not what happened in our regions. So just to give a good sense there.
I hadn't this question in mind, but the way you spoke about this, do you think that the government should be providing like the kind of ecosystem or the kind of support to support these kinds of health tech businesses, or the healthcare, or encourage healthcare providers to adopt the health tech in their businesses to make it boost, or it's simply relying on the willingness of these healthcare providers to adopt the health tech business?
I personally believe government needs to build a fast reaction towards the market dynamics, particularly in terms of regulations and legislations.
Okay.
You know, if COVID happens, a regulation happened 20 days after that is enforcing them to do the claims. This basically what they call it leveling the claims, where basically face-to-face equal to the telehealth. So it pushes the adoption of this kind of technology. And I think the speed is a huge thing when it comes to that, because you could put the right rule and law, but later, which would not help much if that happens. And I personally believe, which I know it's not a known or a highly agreed on point, but I also personally believe that government in healthcare should not play in the provider landscape. These should not have hospitals. These should not have clinics. These just should not. They are an accreditation entity, a regulation and legislation entity, and maybe they could play a payer role. But when it comes to the provider, they definitely should not play in that space.
Okay. So, Nader, what do you think about the current industry trends that you perceived, or the industry, let me call it the new business models that you see most prominent in the health tech industry?
Yani, of course, health tech is such a broad name and broad definition at this stage, because there are so many areas, like, for example, pharmaceutical supply chains, remote diagnostics, as Amir was mentioning, wearables, and this whole industry is growing very fast with players like Apple and Amazon, really fighting hard to enter this space. And I think what's really booming because of Corona at a much faster pace is the telemedicine space, because telemedicine has been around for many years, of course, but because of Corona, it was like force majeure. So hospitals, clinics, individual doctors all had to push very hard in order to actually provide medical care as well as to survive. So you see companies in the UK, and not even companies, even the NHS, for example, just looking at primary care, the amount of teleconsultation sessions that were done during Corona, it grew in thousands of percentages because it was a force majeure. So of course, as a result, health tech providers are seeing this opportunity. And now everybody is talking about health tech, and the challenge will be, are you just doing a copy-paste model, or are you in your particular country or region going to localize and innovate in a way that will create a barrier of entry, perhaps, to international players that might want to enter your market? So definitely it's growing very fast, definitely in Egypt especially, because of the inefficiencies in many aspects of the healthcare system or ecosystem. There is really a lot of opportunities, and I agree with Amir. I mean, it's much easier to go down the B2C model than B2B in general, and especially in healthcare. And I remember when we opened the Dawi Medical 3 years ago, roughly, we were hesitant to use the word customer, we were, more inclined to use the word patient. But the consumerization of healthcare as a result of so many things the past 2 years has led many players to be comfortable to use the word consumer or customer, which changes a lot of the dynamics regarding, customer acquisition, retention, growth, penetration, segmentation. It becomes more mature suddenly, very quickly.
Okay, thank you very much for this broad answer as well. I'll move to Yara and would like to ask, what is the current appetite of the traditional healthcare providers to adopt new business models of healthcare or health tech solutions to their industry? So what is their current appetite? Are they willing to do this, or are they forced? Is it just by COVID-19, or was there a trend that was starting in the beginning?
I think with this question, we go back to your earlier question about the policies and the importance of policies in driving the adoption rate within the provider space. So, for example, in the US, what we've seen is that Epic and Cerner, and these are like the biggest two companies that provide electronic medical records, has been there since the early 70s. But they didn't become massive until the Obama administration has enacted the law that said that all the hospitals need to have electronic medical records and set the standards for the electronic medical records. So what we've seen is that specifically after COVID, the government started putting some laws, and especially with the reimbursement of telehealth, as Amir and Nader were saying earlier. So for example, in the UAE, the government has, I think, approved 6 new telehealth organizations. And in Saudi as well, they have improved a couple. But with the regulations and with the digital health strategies of the countries, now more and more players are getting into the market, because the health providers, so the primary healthcare clinics, the hospitals, and as it stands right now in the region, the ministries of health are the providers. So, and they are providers for, and especially, for example, in the Gulf here in Saudi, and for a big part of the UAE as well, they are providers. They have many hospitals, many clinics. They have also the laboratory chains, and they are the payer for as well, regardless if this governance works or not, but it's the case. So when they start enacting strategies, more and more, this gives more space for digital health solutions to be adopted, and this is what we've been seeing. Also, lately in the UK, there has been I don't know, like they created a new bill to have 400 new hospitals in all over the UK region, and with the new administration, they put a law saying we don't want the old hospitals anymore. We want to have a new idea for digital hospitals. So we want to understand how the hospital is going to look like in 2030. And with that, most of the traditional players have been working with multiple of startups to propose how the new hospitals are going to look like. And I think the first hospital is coming out like in the next year, if that answers your question.
I really like reimagining the hospitals. How would they look in actually 10 years from now? So are we aiming as having a fully digital hospital where somebody is sitting in his home, he gets, first of all, GP consultation, then he gets a drone delivering the prescription, as well as an artificial intelligence data record that predicts, for example, a health issue that will take place and directly to the specialist and so on? I really don't know. So this brings me to a question, which is, how can we currently trying to reimagine or imagine the future in 10 years or 15 years? How can we capitalize on the current fourth industry revolution? I'm talking about Internet of Things. I'm talking about artificial intelligence, digital twinning, all these kind of new interventions that represent the fourth digital revolution, to imagine our future hospitals or our future health tech industry. And is there a current gap that we need to fill that is not there, is not fulfilled? So this question is to all the guest speakers. So whoever wants to jump on this, please, you're free.
Yeah. Amir.
Amir, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Amir,
Nader. I'll follow you. Go ahead.
Maybe just one or two words. Thank you, Amir. I think, we're all familiar with the statement, data is the new oil, right? And if you take that statement as an umbrella to all the definitions and opportunities you mentioned, you'll find that really all the different players in the ecosystem are trying to collect data from as many sources as possible, analyze it as quickly as possible, predict trends as accurately as possible, and deliver the fastest, most accurate, most reliable service as soon as possible. And really, if you take that umbrella across, whether it's pharmaceutical supply chains or analyzing thousands of images per second related to heart scans or MRIs or whatever, there's so much going on in analyzing data that even the self-meditation apps and the apps that will monitor your sleep and monitor your mood while you are sleeping, the list goes on and on and on. How much of this will actually really truly affect the bottom line in terms of ROI of investment as well as the health of the patient, I think is open to discussion.
Okay.
I will build on what Nader has said, and I will take it from a different angle. To really visualize what's going to happen in healthcare in 10 years' time and hospitals 10 years' time, I would take a step back and say, we as an entrepreneurship ecosystem in our country, we need to think of our own localized pains, build startups that are actually serving and solving these kind of things. And particularly in healthcare, that is even more emphasized and more clearer than what we have seen in other industries. The Me Too kind of model just doesn't work. Think about PillPack in the US, where they are basically taking the medication, they put the medication in dosage in sachets. Just imagine you send these kind of medications to your patients here in Egypt. Most probably, they will literally come to your place, hit you in the face, and go back home. So you can't do this, right? You need to think of what is the problem and how to solve it. And every single problem in our market, in healthcare, needs a localized taste. And sometimes taste is a little bit of a change, but sometimes a complete transformation. And investors as well, who are investing in these companies, 5-6 years ago, they wouldn't have bought that. They would have basically said, no. I want you to do the same way I have seen it in UK, or I want to do the same way I've seen it in US. And we in Vezeeta have fallen in this as well, right? We many times trying to please one of our investors, we change the model, we hit the wall, we go back and we say, that's what's working in our market. And they will basically say, I'm not investing. We have seen this. And then 2 years' time, they put the check. And it's really, entrepreneurs need to think about it even more and more in healthcare. What is our pain? How I'm solving it? And how I'm selling this not only to the market, but to the investors, because you're selling them, I'm doing this opportunity in my market, which is a little bit different than how it's done in the US or in UK or in Germany. And they need to trust that this is how it will work. Taking this, looking at this, and then I would say AI, machine learning, and wearables, and all of these beautiful names, at the end of the day, it's different options that are in the, think of them as resources to solve the pains that you have found. They themselves are not an objective. And if there's one good news when it comes to healthcare, competition coming from the outside world would be way less than what you see in transportation, than what you see in e-commerce. It's a hyper localized game. It's a good news, but it would also require true entrepreneurs to solve the problems that the market would see.
If I can add, if I can add to this as well. So, like from the provider adoption perspective, what we've been seeing is that, like, first you have like the traditional model of healthcare, then you have the old digital model, which is basically changing things from paper-based model into like a digital format. So think of the X-ray, like you used to go do an X-ray and get like this big report in your hand. Now you go do an X-ray and you get a CD. We're still yet to see. So it's a little bit of incremental changes here and there. Of course, there are some people who are pushing the boundaries, doing new things. However, what has been currently happening is incremental changes to the status of digitalization, and we need to adopt all the technologies that Amir was talking about, AI, machine learning, and wearables, and integrate them within the business model, or create new forms of business model to change the whole shape of healthcare, not only doing like just small incremental changes that uses technology just to move from paper-based to whatever that is called a digitalization. And this needs providers that would be more flexible. This needs investors that would be more flexible to a more risk taker also to try new things. And also entrepreneurs who would be happy to push the boundaries and not just try to solve a little problem by doing some incremental changes.
Can I add to this a very quick comment? I also believe providers themselves will be disrupted. I actually think if there is a one opportunity that I would see in the Middle Eastern market, is the potential of disrupting providers and introducing a very different shape of providers compared to the one that we see today. I do not think, I personally believe there is a entrepreneurship that will end up serving providers, or entrepreneurship that will end up competing with providers, serving payers, competing with payers. I always believe the true entrepreneurship is what will change the shape of the industry. If you think you will provide something to the provider, I would say it's half the way through of entrepreneurship. Because he would tell you what he wants. That's kind of a service organization. It's amazing, it's great, it's tech, but it's not entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is to change the status quo, to end up in eliminating pains in the market by literally changing the status quo. And I really believe providers-based kind of tech startup are coming big time.
Okay. Thank you, Amir, for this comment. It's lovely that we hear that you believe that entrepreneurship is it is the disruption. So disrupting the current status quo. So having this said, where do we stand in terms of health tech in Egypt and the region versus other more developed countries who are more in the tech business or more towards the health tech, or who have more adopted the health tech business models? So can you, Nader, say something about this?
I can try. I think maybe a comparison to what happened in fintech, for example, might be helpful. As you know, fintech grew very rapidly in Africa primarily, and then Asia, and then gradually it moved to the western part of the world. I think in health tech, it actually is vice versa. The Western world took the lead, perhaps, or not perhaps, for sure, because of what Amir said related to the government and insurance and the cooperation in the ecosystem and the maturity in the ecosystem. But I think that companies in Africa especially have a lot of talent and have now the advantage of seeing the models abroad, which succeeded, which failed, which can be localized in a unique way. And hence we can really provide solutions that international players will not be able to provide in our context. So I think with 5G coming up and with players in the ecosystem providing different technology enablers like wearables, etc., and different resources like data mining and artificial intelligence. There is a lot of opportunity for Egyptian startups with our huge population, as well as our ability to expand across the region with very innovative solutions.
Thank you very much, Nader, Amir, and Yara. Now I will move to, I think, something that I believe students would like to hear about, because most of our entrepreneurship students, and a lot of them want to hear a little bit, not only the success stories, but actually the challenges that you guys faced, because you have your own startups, and I'm sure it wasn't a rosy paved way of doing things. I think it was a bumpy way, and it took a lot of effort, dedication, consistency, willingness, and everything that I can say. So I will start by Yara to share her startup experience, then I will move to Amir, then to Nader to share a little bit, how was your startup, what are the challenges that you face, that you need to warn our students if they ever think that they want to start a business, not only our students, but every person who would like to have his own tech startup, be it health tech, fintech, whatever the startup, so that you can share this experience. So Yara, the floor is yours.
Sure. So I started a startup. It was like a basic thing, on-demand model for doctors. But at this point, I was living in Switzerland, just came back, super excited about tech, super excited about startups, and then it's like, okay, let's see what's happening in the market and how can we push this through. Well, it didn't last very long, so I think it went on for maybe a year or a year and a half, and then from that I moved on to nursing, which is still there. So this is one successful bit of it. But what I've seen is that 7 years ago, at some point, the market was not ready for this. The market, so the investors that I talked to weren't necessarily seeing the point of on-demand platform for doctors. They were saying, no, it doesn't make sense. No doctor, not even like a consultant would go to a patient. They were completely disregarding this business model. And the other thing that I was seeing is that there weren't really pockets of support that would support the health tech startups. So if I needed to talk with investors who have a knowledge of the healthcare space, they weren't really as accessible as they are today. And from this, I moved on to Health 2.0, which is a startup that is basically dedicated to supporting entrepreneurs within the health sector. So we try to bring together investors, we try to bring together healthcare providers and healthcare professionals who can actually give advice and support entrepreneurs within this space. But also, I was still new to the Egyptian market. That's another good thing.
If you are thinking, or you just landed from Switzerland yesterday, would you start whatever you started 7 years ago now?
I think now it's a little bit too late to do it again because it was on-demand model for doctors 7 years ago. That was a new thing. But now, like, you have the on-demand healthcare model everywhere for doctors, for nurses, for diagnostics, for almost everything. So I'd maybe move to something that has a little bit more edge.
So we're here talking about a window of opportunity. So you entered the market before the window of opportunity that started. You missed the window of opportunity working on something else, and then you cannot come because there is a window of opportunity here that we need to catch. If we don't catch it, then it will be very difficult. Am I correct?
Exactly, but this also shows the impressive development in only, this was 2000, I came back 2013, so now 7 years. So this shows the impressive development in the market in only 7 years. 7
Okay.
years ago, like basically the on-demand model weren't that popular. I think there was only one startup that went on for 6 months but never really launched, and it was incubated in Teak. But this was it. Now I don't know how many tens of them that you have in the market, and this shows how fast is this space progressing. So
Okay.
if you have a good idea, just do it now, but also notice what is the market accepting at this point.
Thank you, Yara, for this. Now, I'll move to Amir. Amir, I know for sure that Vezeeta, when you started the Untitled, was not intended to do what it's currently doing. It was intended to do something else.
Yeah.
Related to health tech, of course, or health services, but it wasn't intended to do what it's currently doing. Am I correct?
100%. We had I think Ahmed Badr, the co-founder, myself, Ziad Mukhtar, the first early investor. We always had this joke, obviously at the good times, because the bad times were quite abundant at the beginning. We had this joke that Vezeeta is like 3-4 startups together until you ended up with something that's working. We basically started by building software for clinics. And I come from a pharma background, so we built a phenomenal sales organization. And we were having, I think it's 82%, either 82 or 79% hit rate. So like really, you go to 100 doctors, like 79 of them would sign a deal and take the software as a service in their clinics. We were knocking it out of the park. We're like, we're on top of this world. Let's literally the first 4 or 5 months. And then when you look at the utilization, the adoption, none, not zilch, nothing. Nobody is using anything. They keep on paying their monthly subscription fees. So we're making money, but nobody's using the system. So we understand, okay, this is not going anywhere. Like they will keep on paying until they realize that they're not using it, they're dropping off. And I would never forget one of the visits that we had, Bed and myself, to the market. And we asked him, why are you not using it? Then he said, and you're paying. And he said, my mistake, I'm bad. I will take care next day. And we realized, okay, we're not solving a pain. We built something that somebody said in the US that it's phenomenal, and somebody said in Europe that it's phenomenal. I said, okay, let's get it to our market, or put it to the market. And the market said, I don't need it. And I would never forget, we even started to say, what's happening? Egyptians are not ahead of it. They're not getting it. They're not advanced enough. Oh my God. And we were wrong. We're just solving something that the market doesn't have a problem with, period. And when I remember all the doctors were saying, particularly the younger ones, like, can you get our name in the world? Like, help us get more bookings. And I was like, we're not a booking platform. That's not who we are. We're much bigger. We're data. We are EMRs. But that's how it started. The moment we start to actually listen to the market pains, we start to see growth that we wouldn't have even put in our plans for the initial product. So, yeah.
So what was your most important, considerable challenges that you faced when you started your business?
So other than the business model and the product market fit, I would say hiring.
Hiring.
Absolutely. This is, so I think Egypt is full of talents, but I would actually add a very important piece, that discipline is something that in startup, it's a very, very big ask. So getting those who believe, getting them excited enough, they're disciplined, I think it's a major barrier, particularly that you are picking your team from a large base. And then when you find the superior ones, everybody wants them. Everybody is like, everybody wants your superior people. So you build your dream team, and there's like I would say the top 20 talents that we have in Vezeeta, they would get on an average one offer every week. to the moment that it's like, okay, how are we going to stop that? And it takes time to build this standard. So I really think hiring and building the right team is the biggest challenge and the biggest building block for a successful organization.
Thank you very much, Amir. I'll move now to Nader, who's last but not least in this. Nader, you left the family business, which is something I envy you for, and you had your own startup, actually, and a very recent startup as well. So what are the things, the challenges that you faced? What made you take this decision of leaving the family business? And actually, what was attractive in going to your own startup? And the challenges, of course, too many questions.
Yeah, for political reasons, I'll skip the why I left the family business in case the recording reaches the family.
But I know about this. I know about it.
No, actually, I think I'll just maybe highlight a couple of points. I think, entrepreneurship is really, it's a passion. I used to read about, especially in the West, people do a startup at 40, they sell it at 45, they do another startup at 46, they sell it at 50, they do another one at 51, they sell it at 55. And I used to wonder, if this is really what you call the DNA of an entrepreneur. And I remember when our division was sold to Fawry, our fintech division was sold to Fawry around a year and a half ago. 2 weeks later, I was like, what am I doing? And my family would tell me, you should relax and rest and enjoy this. But for me, it was like, no, we have to do something different in the health tech space. And that's why O7 came into being. But what I've learned really across the different startups is really the co-founders is a major investment in terms of getting the right mix. And I would highlight in healthcare specifically, it is really important, I think, to have an industry expert, if you are lucky, within the co-founding team. And I don't mean industry expert as someone who has done research, but someone from the industry itself. So, for example, in Dairy Medical, we are three. And one is managing the business, is a management guru. The other is a medical guru. The third, we're in the technology space. When it comes to O7, we are also three. One is one of the leading psychiatrists in Egypt. The other is a management guru. The third is strategy and technology. And I think in the healthcare space, if you don't want to just make a copy-paste model, you need some inside information, inside connections, inside know-how about the real issues within the country, within the space that you are trying to penetrate. It does not mean that if a couple of AUCs want to do a health tech startup, they have to look for a doctor or radiologist or whatever. But at least on the advisory board, they should have one or two serious gurus in this field. I think it will save them a lot of time and help the product market fit perhaps become more faster because there might be barriers that are not related to technology at all, and in order to discover them you might spend 2 years or you might spend 2 weeks. So I think an industry expert in the co-founding team is an asset.
Okay. And do you think that, because a lot of times I get even this question during the class from my students, what is the most appropriate, and this question is not only for Nader, for all of us, so what is the most appropriate number of co-founder? Is it better to have just one co-founder who has his own control, his mind, his decisions, or having multiple co-founders with a number odd or even whatever the number? So what are your recommendations that we can tell to our startups and our students?
From my experience, I can start. I really like the number 3. I think 3 is healthy. It provides a healthy space for disagreements, healthy space for effective brainstorming, healthy space for someone to play the part of an objective observer or an objective evaluator of different points of view, especially if they have complementing skills. They are not all three strong in technology or all three strong, for example, in medical. From my experience, I'm very comfortable with the number three. One of my startups, we were two, and unfortunately, our co-founder passed away. And that was, in an accident. And that was a very huge loss to me personally, and of course, to the business. And I've also been involved in startups which have like 4 or 5. And it becomes very complicated because, as you know, emotional intelligence is such an important skill. And I think, it has to be invested in a lot in universities and schools and so forth in order to be able to manage such a large number in huge strategic or financial difficulties or different points of view.
Thank you, Nader. What about you, Yara? What do you think?
Sorry, Dr. Hakim, I kind of lost track of the initial question.
No, the question is simply, what is the ideal number of co-founders that you think should be there? A single co-founder versus multi-co-founders? What do you think? I know that's not related to the health tech, but what's the ideal scenario in your opinion? Because we're balancing mainly two things. Having one single co-founder or founder who is really goes very quick in decision making and so on, versus having 2 or 3 co-founders or 5, whatever, who brainstorm together, but this may result in slowing down the decision making process and so on.
Like from my side, I think my ideal scenario is 2 co-founders. So that's what I see as ideal. 2 people who are complementing, not only, as Nader was saying, not only on like technology, healthcare, and business side, but also who are complementing each other in terms of attitudes and behaviors. If someone is more strategic, more analytical, takes more time to think, the other person would be a little bit more risk taker, would be a bit more, just tries to move faster into the market. But an initial understanding between the 2 co-founders is the most important. And for me, I think this is what have worked best for me. When it starts getting more than this, it then starts getting a bit more complicated in terms of decision making. And then you would complement the rest of the co-founders with an advisory board that have a specific expertise in this.
Thank you, Yara. And Amir?
That's a very tricky question. I think it's I would recall what Ahmed Badr said in the very beginning of Vezeeta when we were co-founding it together. He said the success of this is highly dependent on alignment of objectives. It's very clear, right? If this is for me, the company number 4, and this for him is a company number 1, we're going to kill each other. If I am ridiculously wealthy and he's still in the beginning of his road, we're going to kill each other. It's not, if there's no alignment of objective, and I would add alignment of status. This is a kind of are we building this because this is one company that want to make it big and make an exit at $400-500 million? Or we are having a series of companies, nice, beautiful companies. Nothing is wrong. But we need to agree what are we doing, and both sides agree on this is what we are in for. So I think the first one is alignment of objectives and status. 2, who's going to lead? And the beautiful myth that everybody's going to lead together like a group, that doesn't exist. You will disagree starting by how you're going to name your company. And sometimes who's going to lead, and sometimes we even say who's going to lead in what. So I will lead in 1, 2, 3, he will lead on 4, 5, 6, and these kind of things. And I think it's a huge thing of how you would make this happen. Three, I would personally believe 1, 2, or 3 co-founders, it doesn't really matter, but there's always one person behind the idea. And I would say something I've said it a couple of times before. The one who was actually behind the idea of booking was Badr. It was not me. He was actually calling for this from day 2, and I was saying that's a bad idea. So really, it's the reality of matter. There's a person who has an idea, he puts it in the market, execution change, but that's how it works. And then other people would go around this concept and make it happen and build it together. So I really think it's a roles distribution, alignment of objectives, alignment of status, and identifying who would do what are very important piece, more important than the numbers of the co-founders.
Thank you very much. I think given the time that we're allowed, I think we should allocate the remaining time for our students' questions. First, thank you very much for these lovely insights that I personally learned from. I would like to open now the floor for whoever is attending. So if you have questions for our guests, please raise your hand and I will allow you to speak to our guest speakers. So you can also type your question in the chat, which I'm currently checking now. So any questions? You can raise your hand through the raise hand option as well.
I think we have raised hands, Dr. Hakim.
Just a minute. I have Omar Zaid. So Omar, please unmute yourself, and if you'd like to show your camera, you can. Omar Ziyad, I'm sorry. So you can speak to our guests now. Go ahead, Omar.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hakim, and thank you so much for the EC for this amazing opportunity, and thank you so much for the speakers as well. My question is to Dr. Amir. How you can handle the objection of doctors who are resistant to use the technology? I think this is the most, maybe the most difficult challenge in such a business. So what are the strategies you are using in Vezeeta to handle the doctors who are old-fashioned or classic doctors who are not friendly with the technology? Thank you so much.
Of course. I think I've mentioned that during the meeting. When I go to the doctor and tell him, I think I remember the first presentation we used to go to the doctors with. We made a graph and we showed how fintech is taking over finance and how transportation has been changed by technology. And we're saying that's the time now for healthcare. And then another graph to explain the number of doctors adopting technology and how they're less than 1%. They all agreed, but it didn't work. Because again, I was not solving a pain. Using technology is not an objective. Who cares? Like, if there's a better way than not using technology, let's go and do it. The idea is, what is the pain? When we came and introduced a true value to these doctors, technology became the solution to solve the problem. They adopted it, and they adopted it actually really well. So it really start by the pain, go to the solution. If it happens to be technology, I promise you they will adopt it. 2, pick your lovers. Not everybody would say I'm fan, right? Especially the early ones. And I'm not only talking about early adopters or not, but I'm even talking about who is in the mind state that is willing to jump in now and use your product to solve his pain. And pick those. And it could take some time to pick those, but I think creating the mindset and the capacity to do this would be superiorly helpful. We, for example, have an internal name that we call the Rising Stars. So we go to the doctor who's still not yet a star, but he wants to be a star. And those are actually the early people. And usually they were younger than the elder ones, so they adopted technology. 3, and which is the last comment here, is to make sure you are giving the technology to them the least, walk them through the education and the adoption cycle. Give them the least possible features that could make it work. Only the least possible features. Sometimes we call it the brutal prioritization, which is a term that you would see a lot in technology. But really, when you execute brutal prioritization, say, these are 6 features, all are amazing. You know what? Take 5 out and see which one of them is really what they're looking for. So, yeah.
I'll move to Jean Bitar, who just
Thank you so much, Doctor.
Raised his hand as well, and then I will ask the question on behalf of
I wanted to ask Dr. Amir Barsoum about the co-founder numbers. From what I got, I think it's a personal preference that it be on a smaller number. But from my point, and let's say if there are 5 designated leaders في كل مثلا في كل مثلا department, or let's say a partition of the startup, هيبقوا مسؤولين that they have absolute authority. But wouldn't, like, if the number increase a bit, and let's say at 5 with different personality, different school of thoughts, would be very much appreciated in the startup? It would be a benefit?
You know, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not a professor, so I will answer in an entrepreneurial way that could be crazily blunt. I think that is a soccer game. That's not a startup. I do not believe ever that 5 are aligned in objectives, aligned in status. I just don't believe in this. 2, there's a big difference between people who are investing money, interested, but a founder is a person who is willing to leave, like what Nader has done before. Like, he left his family business to start the company. That is a founder. A founder is a person who's taking massive risk to build an opportunity that he is a big believer in. And this creates intense moments. Intense moments between 5 is a blood-shedding exercise. And I don't think that everyone should be owning his own function. That doesn't exist as well. It's not 5 companies, it's 1 company, and people need to be aligned together. Again, that's my thoughts. Nader could have another opinion about it.
That's fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Now, what do you think the price sensitivity and volume usage for your target segment when it comes to healthcare startups? So that was a question asked by Sarah El Gamal. So any of our guest speakers, or is it directed to Mr. Nader or Mr. Amir? Could you specify, Sarah?
Yes, it's directed to Mr. Amir.
We are in the business of converting.
So patients. Amir, you got it.
Yeah, we are in the business of converting patients into consumers, which is something that Nader has mentioned and Yara in different pieces of the comments. And our target customer is the consumer, is the patient. This is what we are serving. This is who we are. We are a consumer company, and price sensitivity is something that we do not handle, because we are a marketplace where our role is to make sure that we have a well-diversified landscape of providers. The expensive doctors, the cheaper ones, or the affordable ones, the labs, the radiology centers, all types of medications, the branded, the generics, and so on and so forth. And we're very cautious when it comes to charging patients, if any. So that's also a very tricky part. Volume, but I would say something on this. A company, a true startup, I personally believe, is what plays in the middle class range. That's where change happens. You could go up to increase your ARPO, your average revenue per user, and enjoy that. You could go down to increase the volume, but personally, I believe real value and real meat comes in the middle class.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Amir. And I don't see any other coming questions. Do you have any other question, guys, before I do my closing remarks? Yeah, I have another question. Again, to Amir. At the beginning phase of Vezeeta, what was the main goal? Is it to gain patients or to gain doctors on the platform?
The typical chicken and egg problem of a marketplace. A marketplace is a platform that is connecting two sides, which is where you want to start. I think we played it in a very localized manner, particular areas. We get the doctors first, and then we go get the patients in this area, and then we expand from there. But I would say it's always, you're walking on two legs. It's one step here and one step there. You can't take one leg 10 steps and leaving the other behind. You will not end up whole. So it's always doctors and patients, and then now we're doing pharmacy and patients, and now and then radiology, and then you grow from that. So you need to be balanced, very well balanced.
I have my own question actually to our guest speakers, which is what is the thing that is there something really that we can call the critical mass, or the time after, or the mass, or the number of customers or consumers, as Nader now said it with consumerization, where we really have to sit down and say, yes, we did it, we reached this, and now it's growing exponentially without the huge effort that we started at the beginning? Is there this concept that we can introduce to our audience? Nader, I would appreciate if you'd like to answer this.
It's been a discussion recently, especially in public companies like Uber and Lyft and so forth, which is, till when will a company keep burning cash without being profitable in order to reach a certain scale or critical mass? And there's been a healthy debate that has affected also startups. So now you find angel investors really looking in depth at the unit economics of your forecasts to see whether your target is just market share without a clear visibility to when you will be profitable. And so I think the word critical mass depends a lot on your segment and depends a lot on your growth strategy vis-a-vis the investor appetite and his vision as well or her vision as well for what constitutes healthy growth. And I think financials in general as a skill set needs to be also common across, I think, the co-founders, because it will really affect how you make strategic decisions when you have proper financial analysis across different stages of the growth.
So I would like now to ask a question to our guest speakers before we close, which is, what is your advice? There is a question here coming, so I will delay my question. It's by Omar again. In Teletech industry, the recipe of target patients who are not technology users. I mean, the initial segment may be AB class, but what about the patients who are struggling to use social media or health apps in general? So I think what Omar is trying to say, are there inhibitors of penetrating the health tech industry given education level of consumers, internet penetration rate, mobile penetration rate, and all of these? If I understand properly his question, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Yara.
Go ahead, Yara.
Yeah. So what I think is that initially you have like the health literacy. If people already have understand their healthcare and have health-seeking behavior or not, this is one of the inhibitors. The more you have educated people, the higher health literacy, the more people have health-seeking behavior, and then they can actually look for health apps, use new things. And then you have the other part of it, which is the digital literacy. So if they can use technology or they cannot use technology. And usually the strategy would be to start with people who have higher health literacy and higher digital literacy. But with the mobile penetration, you have like 100% mobile penetration. You need to target like your solution with different levels of technology to different people. So most people could actually use a phone. Most people could use WhatsApp. But then, for example, when you go to Africa, so I was working on a project in Sierra Leone, you don't really use WhatsApp. You still use Bluetooth to send information, or recorded messages that you still send through, I don't know, Bluetooth or other technologies, or SMSs. That's what works. So understanding the level of the health literacy and digital literacy of your population, and then targeting which technology that you use that then you can deploy for them.
Okay, thank you very much, Yara. Amir, you had something to comment upon.
Yeah, I would say there's no such user, and there's nobody who doesn't use social media. And if there is, I'm as a startup builder and an entrepreneur, I wouldn't even focus on that. Like, let's face it, you are in the business. At the end of the day, you are in a tech company. Nader and Yara mentioned it many times, the ROI, the return on investment. This is a for-profit organization. If we have 100 million population and you're really focusing on those who are above 65 years old in extreme rural areas, they are most probably are like 10 to 15 million. Like, yeah, just focus on the right segment, make it happen, and with time you will find those are coming. Again, the last 7 years in Egypt, I wouldn't think at all that digital users are actually the A and B. I don't think this is the case at all.
Thank you very much. I have one last question, which is Dali's business model. Who did you have in mind when you started as your customer?
Dairy was targeted to the middle class, and it still is. It will always remain that focus for many reasons. Of course, as Amir said, the size. But in reality, one of our biggest reasons was that we really felt that the middle class in Egypt deserves a better level of treatment and a standardized, high quality level of service that's not dependent on the name of the doctor, but depends on the brand of the clinic and the processes that are in place. So we are really, we get really excited and proud and happy when we use, the customer surveys, and people, don't go to 4 doctors after visiting Dawi. They visit Dawi and they're comfortable with the diagnosis process. They're comfortable with the level of integrity and transparency in the process. And hence they don't go down this route of burning cash to get 3 or 4 opinions, which really hits the bottom line of middle class.
Exactly. So I have one other minute for a question that just came, and I don't like to turn down questions from our students. So Nadine Al-Azab mentioned, would telemedicine evolve in Egypt, or patients still need to meet the doctors physically as a cultural habit? So is culture here standing in front of the health tech, or will it not?
I'm trying to leave the questions for others, because I've answered many. So
Nader or Yara, would you like to step in?
Yara, go ahead.
First. I think telehealth is booming. There was resistance from the consumers. There was resistance to actually find a good business model for telehealth. But I think, especially after COVID, there is now no turning back from telehealth. The telehealth companies,
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so the telehealth companies, you have Al-Tibbi, for example. they have been announcing more and more, actually, more and more, what is it called? Calls that they do every single day. And other telehealth companies are coming up, and what we see, for example, in as I said at the beginning of the webinar, in UAE and in Saudi, they have approved telehealth for reimbursement, and you can only think that Egypt is going to follow suit.
Yeah, I
Thank
think
you so
Dr.
much.
Hakim, I think doctors soon will pay patients money for visiting them as a discount for driving 2.5 hours to see a doctor.
That would be a lovely vision for the future. And with this lovely comment, very interesting one, I think I should close the questions now and do one important thing, which is thanking very much our guest speakers, Mr. Nader, Mrs. Yara, and Mr. Amir Barsoum, who really enriched our knowledge. I'll leave the floor to Hala for some closing comments. And I really learned a lot from this. I really enjoyed it. I didn't feel the time, but I'm keeping conscious of time, so I'll leave it to Hala. Go ahead, Hala.
Thanks, Dr. Hakim.
Thank you, Dr. Hakim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hakim, for moderating this interesting, engaging session. Maybe the time will come when we have robots operating on us in an operation room, and we'll have a robot answering our psychological concerns on 07 therapy, okay, handling our psychological distresses. Maybe that day will come. I'm not sure how we'll be handling it then. But I'm sure that having all these entrepreneurial mindsets and entrepreneurs, and having our students with their innovation and creativity being taught by professors, will be a driving force, especially in a very, very important field in our country and in the region, which is health tech. I'd like to thank you all. Thank you, Nader Iskandar. Thank you, Yara Abo el Waffa, and thank Amir Barzoum for your time and dedication to be with us tonight and enrich our students. And I hope to see you again soon, maybe next time physically on AUC campus.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Okay, you too. Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.